this is experienced as a battle for willpower. And a lot of the times, many people who are going through a spiritual awakening don't know that this is happening, don't know that this is what they're tuning into or experiencing, but it could just be experienced as pending anxiety. Non-being and being at this level of reality are actually co-creating together. They're collaborating. One of the most challenging, anxious, and crippling parts of going through a spiritual awakening is awakening to the metaphysical battle between being and non-being. So today, I'm going to be explaining how non-being can be experienced by us as feeling like we have paralyzed will or existential dread. Both being and non-being have duality to them. What this means is that there is a negative and a positive expression of even non-being. That's why we see in a lot of Eastern mysticism, non-being being portrayed as a positive, if not neutral, concept. But then we also hear sometimes in some esoteric circles of non-being. And this version of non-being isn't so neutral and it isn't very positive. It's not the void, because non-being in its positive form or in its neutral form would be the void. It would be also called in physics the frequency domain. So it is the invisible, no-thingness realm from which somethingness springs, or from which creation now manifests. But this other version of non-being, this negative polarity of non-being, is one that we would call annihilation. It's also known as negation, and it's expressed as nihilism. So we have this more negative form of non-being, and its polarity, its expression, is one that seeks to dominate. It seeks to silence creation. It seeks to take away creation. It wants to unmanifest the manifested. So if being is manifested, and if being is this larger metaphysical concept of choosing to exist, then non-being would be one that chooses to not exist. It wants to undo existence. It wants to silence existence. It does not want creation to be. And this is the non-being that we are going to talk about today, because this is experienced as a battle for willpower. And a lot of the times, many people who are going through a spiritual awakening don't know that this is happening, don't know that this is what they're tuning into or experiencing, but it could just be experienced as pending anxiety, a sense of anxiousness in the background of their lives. It could be experienced as existential dread. And most of all, how we manifest this battle of wills is through paralyzed willpower. So the positive side to non-being is known as the void. It is the ultimate blank slate from which we create, from which we project on, from which we have thought forms arise from, and then from there they pixelize or they form and fractalize into creation. They fractalize into beings, into egos, into different manifestations. So from non-being, just the void, the nothingness, comes forward somethingness. And this can also be seen as the passive side of infinity. And the passive side of infinity is simply the nothingness that then turns into the active side of infinity. And when we're in the active side of infinity, now we spring forth and we choose to be. We choose to play the game of existence. And so, non-being and being at this level of reality are actually co-creating together. They're collaborating. But non-being and the negative side to non-being, one that there ought to be a better word and term for. So let's call it nihilism. Let's call it negation. This form of non-being is not the form that is the void, the blank slate from which we create. It is the force that wants to silence, that wants to stop the existing of being. And when we experience this inside our own personal lives and we're not aware that we're tuning in to this force, it can manifest as being hypercritical of ourselves, reality, and others. It can manifest as denial, denying creation, denying the point to anything. That's what nihilism at its worst is. It's denying the point to anything. But you take this and you apply it to the willpower now, and now it's vibrating at the state of paralysis because it's stuck due to so many denials. It's denying its own willpower because it's denying existence at large. So non-being is known as denial, and denial would be the best context ever for this cosmic force that seeks to overpower and shut down being. Non-being and being both come from the same source. Non-being takes on the inverted form of being, just like a photograph also has a negative that is created from its exposure to light, or in this case, the force of being. The energy of non-being expresses itself both inward and outward. When non-being expresses itself outward, this force seeks to deny, but it is in a yang form of denial. What that means is denial will come in the form of oppression, rejection, or even through annihilation. What that means is it wants to deny being or deny another's will. And when the energy of non-being expresses itself inward through its yin form, the energy of non-being will turn that charge of annihilation or domination or rejection inward. It won't look like it's dominating or overpowering another being or even existence. It will look more like, what's the point? It will look nihilistic because it is in a form of futility. But no matter whether it's in its yang expression of dominating others or whether it's in its yin expression of dominating self, it is still the same energy of non-being that is being expressed in either an outward or an inward, an external or an internal way. Paralyzed will comes from this internal domination. It comes from this energy of non-being turning inward into itself as futility. And that is where both existential dread and paralyzed will come from. They come as the existential freeze response. They come from dropping the willpower in vibration all the way down until the will is barely vibrating at all. And this is what we know as futility. So non-being leads to paralyzed will, and paralyzed will leads to both futility and internal annihilation. Isn't that funny how nihilism and annihilation even sound the same? Now, some could say that being is also fighting non-being, so why is being more valid than non-being? Well, that's valid, whatever. So in the largest, most zoomed out macrocosmic context, non-being and being would be what we know in this metaphysical or esoteric battle as God and the devil. The devil would be denial, because the devil isn't necessarily some sort of entity that is against or adversarial to an actual other entity. Non-being would be denial. It would be the force in creation that seeks to deny being. It seeks to say no to being. So if yes is the word that vibrates into creation, that we choose to exist, we choose to play the game of creation, then non-being would be the denial of that yes. It would be the negation. It would be the force in creation that comes to cancel out that thought form which says yes to being created. And through this denial, this metaphysical force works through all of creation. It echoes through all of creation. It would be absolutely futile to think that we don't experience that within ourselves, because we experience all of the cosmos within ourselves. The most we can do, though, is be aware of these forces. And not only be aware of these forces within the cosmos, but also how they play out, how they interplay with each other in our reality and within ourselves, as well as our psyche. Because this is, at the psychological level, the fragmentation between the light and the dark. And when we have that light and the dark projected outward, it turns into a metaphysical battle. So that's where to start when it comes to healing and integrating this paralyzed will. It's first the awareness of what the heck is going on. That's going on. From there, now we can start taking small choices to gain some form of power within our ability to play the game. That could be something simply as monitoring oneself and how hypercritical their thoughts are, and start being more gentle and compassionate with themselves. This would be what we know as compassionate inquiry. When we start simply inquiring into why we see something a certain way, what we're doing is coming from a very compassionate space of open presence. We just want to know. We're not condemning ourselves for acting that way. We're not condemning or judging ourselves. What we're doing is removing the stigma of existence. We're removing the judgments of existing by compassionate inquiry. When we start softening this harshness of being shut down or having paralyzed willpower, what we'll notice is that there's a lot of denial. There's just a lot of denying our personal power, denying our own ability to impact the world, denying that things even have a point. Because at the largest level of everything, there is no point. There is just nothingness. Once again, that's the positive aspect of the void. The void is a blank space. It's a blank canvas that says, paint on me. That doesn't have to be negative. That doesn't have to be sad, even though that could sound very desolate. That could sound very depressing almost, that there's no point. But there's a meaning that we can assign that. So even though there's inherently no meaning, we can either take that no meaning of the void, we can take that no meaning of nothingness and make it real dark or nihilistic. We can take that into, oh, there's no point in anything, there's no meaning, there's no point to existing. We can just start denying and denying and denying and denying existence more by taking that ultra nihilistic, or we could pull back that same truth that there's no point, and find the beauty and the vacancy, the void, that allows us to assign that meaning and allows us to assign that purpose. I hope this has helped you integrate the void. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for higher dimensional guidance through spiritual awakening. See you next time.